Picture it, 1989. The Cold War is still doing its moody end-of-history cosplay. Hair metal is blasting from every Camaro within a 5-mile radius, and Hollywood is quietly realizing that the future might not be chrome and lasers, it might be two extremely well-meaning idiots with a phone booth. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure arrives like a pop-culture time capsule that accidentally swallowed a philosophy textbook and then burped out a catchphrase. On the surface, it's a goofy teen comedy about Bill S. Preston Esquire and Ted Theodore Logan, best friends, aspiring rock gods, and academic cautionary tales, who are one failed history report away from total righteous doom. But underneath the air guitar and whoa, this movie is a surprisingly hopeful little artifact. A story that argues history isn't just dates and battles, it's people. And if you can get those people talking across centuries, across cultures, you might just save the future with kindness, curiosity, and a truly irresponsible approach to time travel. This is the tale of how a low-budget, high-concept comedy became a beloved nerd culture staple. We'll follow its weirdly long road from screenplay to screen, the casting lightning strike that made Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter feel like they'd been best friends since kindergarten, and the way the film turned historical figures into rock concert-level celebrities without completely betraying the spirit of the past. Along the way, we'll also ask the important questions, like why a phone booth is the most radical science fiction technology ever invented, and how a movie built on silliness landed on a message that's, honestly, kinda noble. Be excellent to each other. So grab your most triumphant air guitar, set your watch to Time is a Suggestion, and step into the booth, because the past is about to get weird, very weird, and the future is counting on two dudes who can barely pass history to somehow make history excellent. This is the nerd history of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Before Bill and Ted became a comfort food classic for anyone who's ever said dude with their whole soul, it was just a peculiar question on a blank page. What if the fate of the future depended on two absolute goofballs passing a history class? This is the secret genius of the premise. Most time travel stories pick heroes with lasers, jawlines, and monologues about destiny. Bill and Ted picks two teenage garage band philosophers whose greatest skill is enthusiastic sincerity. They're not chosen because they're brilliant, they're chosen because somehow they're good? Not good at school, not good at planning, not even really good at making music, but good in that dangerously underrated way. Open-hearted, non-cynical, and weirdly brave when it counts. And then the movie gives them the greatest sci-fi tool imaginable. Not a sleek DeLorean, not a government-built portal, but a phone booth. A box you'd associate with prank calls and a couple of quarters, suddenly repurposed into a vessel for cosmic stakes. It's a perfect joke and also a perfect symbol. The future doesn't arrive on a pedestal. Sometimes it shows up looking like a dented public utility. Enter Rufus. Part mentor, part tour guide, part I swear this is important babysitter from tomorrow. His mission isn't to teach Bill and Ted history in the traditional sense, dates, wars, test questions. He needs them to understand history as a living chain of humans making choices, negotiating differences, and occasionally being dragged into a San Dimas shopping mall against their will. And that's where the tone locks in. This isn't time travel as a warning, it's time travel as a handshake. The past isn't just a museum you walk through, it's a party you accidentally host. So the movie does something quietly bold. It turns the great figures of history into characters who can be delighted, annoyed, confused, and most importantly, human. It's not asking, what if we could control history? It's asking, what if we could meet it, talk to it, maybe learn not to be such a jerk about it? Which, in the late 1980s, is almost scandalously wholesome. And then, with the premise established, the film drops its ticking clock. The wild stallion's dream, the looming history report in the future that, somewhere down the line, apparently becomes a utopia because two teenage weirdos learn how to treat people well. A utopia built on decent vibes. That's either the most naive idea ever committed to film, or the most punk rock. Here's the thing about Bill and Ted. The plot is clever, the premise is gold, the jokes land, but none of it works if you don't believe in the dudes at the center of it. Bill and Ted can't just be two dumb teens, they have to be lovably dumb, strangely wise, and crucially, feel like the kind of friends who share one brain cell and treat it like a sacred relic. That chemistry is the movie's true special effect. Alex Winter's Bill comes off like a walking exclamation point, eager, animated, always one excellent away from combusting into pure optimism. Keanu Reeves' Ted is the calmer half of the chaos, still clueless, still a goof, but with a laid-back sincerity that keeps the whole thing from turning mean or obnoxious. It's a balancing act. If they're too sharp, the innocence disappears. If they're too stupid, you stop caring. Somehow, the film hits the sweet spot where you're laughing at them and quietly rooting for them, like your grade depends on it too. And then there's Rufus. Rufus is the film's adult presence, but not the usual kind. He's not a stern principal, not a scolding parent, not a killjoy. George Carlin plays him with this wonderfully straight-faced warmth. He's calm, steady, and just amused enough to make the mission feel like fun instead of preachy. Carlin's comedy persona could be razor sharp, but here he's oddly gentle, like the universe sent a cynic to protect two optimists, and he's trying not to admit that he likes them. And that dynamic matters because it defines the movie's tone. Bill and Ted are chaos, heart, and enthusiasm. Rufus is structure, patience, and the quiet awareness that time is fragile, yet somehow still worth the trip. The casting also helps the film do something rare for a teen comedy. It never turns cruelty into a punchline. Bill and Ted aren't cool in the typical 80s way. They're not winning because they dominate anyone. They win because they listen, they include people, and they keep showing up with the same relentlessly decent energy, which is honestly kind of heroic. And once the trio is assembled, two lovable future legends and their time travel chaperone, the movie can finally light the fuse. Because now we're ready for the moment the story truly becomes Bill and Ted. The history report becomes a world-saving mission, and the past becomes a pickup list. Every great quest has a call to adventure. Frodo gets a ring, Luke gets a lightsaber, Bill and Ted get an F in history and a deadline. And that's the deliciously petty brilliance of the stakes. The world doesn't hang in the balance because of a war or an alien invasion. It hangs in the balance because two teens in San Dimas, California, where strange things are afoot at the Circle K, might fail a class. Their future hinges on the most terrifying force known to adolescence: a disappointed father, a stern teacher, and the crushing realization that you can't charm your way through a report on the entire human past. Enter Rufus, stepping out of the phone booth like time travel is just another errand. He lays it out like the movie's cleanest sci-fi pitch. You need to pass history because your band, yes, your band, eventually inspires a future so harmonious it borders on utopia. The fate of civilization rests on the continued existence of the wild stallions. This is not how destiny usually works. And then the booth actually goes. The first time it kicks into gear, the film makes its promise loud and clear. This isn't going to be sleek, solemn, or technical. It's going to be frantic, goofy, and surprisingly sincere. What follows is essentially the greatest research method ever attempted by people who hate reading. Instead of learning about history, they decide to kidnap it. Their plan is as simple as it is catastrophically irresponsible. Go to famous historical moments, grab famous people, bring them back for a live presentation, get an A, save the future. The movie then becomes a series of escalating, oh no, this is working episodes. as Bill and Ted assemble the most unhinged study group imaginable. And what's remarkable is how the film treats these figures. They're not just props, they're personalities, confused, curious, cranky, delighted, yanked out of their context and forced to deal with the modern world. It's history as culture shock comedy. A few key choices make this section sing. The time travel isn't about changing history, it's about meeting it. Bill and Ted don't conquer the past, they stumble through it, and the past, sometimes patiently, sometimes not, stumbles right back. The fish out of water gag becomes a celebration of humanity. The joke isn't, look how dumb old people were. The joke is, look how weird everything is when you're dropped into it with no instructions. The movie turns learning into empathy. The characters don't walk away with a list of dates, they walk away with a growing sense that every era was full of real people with real priorities, fears, and dreams. And then, like any proper quest, the mission goes sideways fast, because the moment you start collecting historical icons like their action figures, you create a new problem. You now have to keep them from getting lost, arrested, or accidentally starting their own side quest in the local mall, which is exactly where the story becomes something more than time travel hijinks. If the phone booth is the movie's sci-fi gimmick, then San Dimas Mall is the true arena. This is where Bill and Ted stops being a time travel comedy and becomes something weirder and more charming, a celebration of culture shock, curiosity, and the idea that humanity across centuries might actually get along if you just gave it a food court and a little patience. Because once Bill and Ted start dropping historical figures into suburban 1989, the film pivots into the most iconic mode, a series of mini adventures powered by accidental friendship. And here's the sneaky genius. The mall is a modern temple. Not of wisdom exactly, more like commerce, neon, and soft pretzels, but it's a place where everyone ends up, which makes it the perfect neutral ground for Napoleon, Socrates, Joan of Arc, and a bunch of confused shoppers to collide. The movie wrings comedy out of the obvious stuff, ancient people encountering modern convenience, but it does it without punching down. The joke usually isn't, these historical figures are idiots. The joke is, modern life is so absurd that it confuses everyone. Napoleon becomes the MVP of this section because the film realizes something important. If you drop a power-hungry strategist into a mall, he will treat it like a battlefield of consumer opportunity. He doesn't just shop, he conquers. The result is one of the most beloved running gags in the movie, an emperor discovering the intoxicating glory of ice cream and sliding into suburban bliss like it was his destiny all along. Socrates, mispronounced of course because this is Bill and Ted's universe, gets the most thematic moment. He's the one who actually ties the adventure back to the message. Learning isn't memorizing, it's questioning, it's talking, it's trying to understand. He's basically the patron saint of, what if we just discussed it, dude? Joan of Arc finds empowerment in aerobics class, a joke that's funny on its face, but also weirdly fitting. She's a figure defined by conviction, courage, and intensity. Put her in a high-energy modern ritual, and she's not diminished, she's activated. And then there are the smaller brushstrokes, Billy the Kid in a toy store, Genghis Khan discovering sports equipment like he's unlocking a new tech tree, Abraham Lincoln wandering around like a weary adult at a chaotic birthday party trying to keep some kind of moral order intact. What makes all of this work is the movie's vibe policy. No cruelty allowed. The historical figures aren't mocked for being outdated. They're treated like guests at the world's strangest party. Guests who might actually have a great time if you stop panicking and let them explore. And while all of this is happening, Bill and Ted are juggling the classic teen nightmare. Dad is furious. The report is due. The future is allegedly depending on their punctuality, and they may have lost track of multiple famous people in a shopping mall. This is where the ticking clock gets louder. The adventure stops being, yay, time travel, and becomes, oh no, consequences. Because the question shifts from, can they collect history, to, can they get everyone back in time to pass the class without breaking reality or getting arrested? The best comedies do this thing where the fun doesn't stop. It just starts running. faster, louder, with more police sirens. Once the historical dream team is loose in San Dimas, Bill and Ted snaps into deadline mode, because the clock isn't just ticking toward a class presentation, it's clicking toward a fork in the timeline. Either Bill and Ted pass history and become the accidental architects of a brighter future, or they fail, and everything, the wild stallions, utopia, whatever excellent society looks like, collapses under the weight of a bad grade. No pressure, dudes. This stretch of the film becomes a controlled chaos sequence, Bill and Ted chasing scattered historical figures, dodging authority figures, and trying to keep their lives from imploding in multiple directions at once. And the authority figures matter here because they're not villains in the grand sense. They're the everyday kind of obstacle that feels huge when you're a teenager. Ted's dad, representing consequence, disappointment, and the threat of military school, basically the nuclear option for a kid whose identity is band practice. The cops, representing the system's inability to process the sentence, "Yes, officer, I lost Napoleon, he's somewhere near JCPenney," and the school, looming like the final boss of adolescence, the presentation. And here's where the movie's best delightful storytelling trick starts to emerge. Bill and Ted survive not by being smart, but by being persistent and weirdly kind. They don't outwit problems like traditional heroes, they out-heart them. Then the film introduces the concept that elevates everything from a simple chase to a time travel playground. The "we'll remember to do it later" logic. Time travel stories usually emphasize strict rules. Bill and Ted does something much more dangerous. It teaches you that rules can be negotiated as long as you're sincere about it. The movie starts playing with the idea that Bill and Ted can solve problems by exploiting time itself, planting solutions in the past so that they're available in the present. It's comedic, yes, but it's also structurally brilliant. The film trains the audience to think like the characters, not logically, exactly, more like creativity. It's a fantasy of every procrastinator who's ever said, "I'll fix it later," and meant, "I hope the universe bails me out." And somehow, the universe does. This is the point where Bill and Ted stop being passengers on the adventure and start becoming its authors. They're still doofuses, but now they're doofuses with a superpower: commitment to the bit across time and space. Meanwhile, the historical figures are no longer just collected, they're bonding with each other, with the present, with the strange freedoms of the late 20th century. The movie quietly suggests that once you remove people from the propaganda and pedestal of history, they become relatable again. Not perfect, not mythical, just human beings reacting to a world they don't recognize. And all roads lead to the same place: a classroom, a podium, a report worth 50% of the grade and 100% of the fate of civilization. There's a particular kind of magic in the big school presentation finale. It's the quintessential teen movie battleground: fluorescent lights, folding chairs, a teacher with the power of life or death, or at least summer school, and an audience of peers who would rather be anywhere else. And this film walks into that arena and says, what if the nerdiest possible event, a history report, was staged like the final act of a rock concert? Because that's what this is. Not just a class assignment, but a performance. Bill and Ted don't explain history, they introduce it. Like, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the entire past. This scene is why the whole movie works. It pays off every goofy choice by revealing what the film has been quietly arguing all along. History isn't a list, it's a conversation. Bill and Ted's Report is basically a living montage of human experience. Each historical figure gets to speak, sometimes in awe, sometimes with humor, sometimes with the unmistakable vibe of a person who has absolutely no idea why they're in a Southern California high school, but they're going to make the best of it. And it lands because the movie makes an important decision. It lets these icons keep their dignity. The jokes don't come from humiliating them, they come from the juxtaposition of eras. Lincoln doesn't have to become a clown, he's funny because he's solemn in an absurd context, and somehow that solemnity still commands respect. The presentation also does something kind of bold for a comedy. It treats education as more than a hurdle. The point isn't merely get the grade, the point is that Bill and Ted, two guys who seem allergic to traditional learning, discover a form of learning that fits them. They learn by meeting people, they learn by listening, they learn by connecting. And the result is less, here are the facts, and more, here are the humans. Then comes the moment that turns a goofy premise into an earnest little thesis. The room changes. Not just the teacher, everyone. The classmates stop smirking and start paying attention. Not because Bill and Ted suddenly got smarter, but because the story became real, immediate, alive. It's the movie's emotional flex. It proves that sincerity can be persuasive, that curiosity is contagious, and that a bunch of teenagers might actually care about the past if it walked into the room and introduced itself. And of course, because we've all been waiting for it, the teacher is convinced. The great is saved, the future is back on track, the wild stallions live to strum another day. But the movie isn't quite done yet, because it has one more trick to pull. It has to tidy up the timeline, stick the landing, and leave you with a warm aftertaste of a very specific kind of optimism. By any normal Hollywood math, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure shouldn't have endured the way it has. It's a high-concept comedy built on silly voices, a phone booth, and the radical proposition that being nice might actually matter, and yet, here we are. The movie did real business in its day, released February 17, 1989, and ultimately earning over $40 million domestic. But the bigger story is what happened afterward. It settled into the rare status of a quote-friendly, endlessly rewatchable cult classic, the kind that gets passed down like a mixtape. There's a few reasons why it stuck. Number one, it made wholesome feel rebellious. In an era where a lot of comedies leaned on cruelty, Bill and Ted built its whole identity around earnestness and friendship. Be excellent to each other became less of a punchline and more of a slogan people actually tried to live by. Number two, it treated history like people, not wallpaper. Even scholars and cultural critics have noted the odd little spark here. The film is dumb in the most strategic way, using pop comedy to sneak in curiosity and empathy about the past. Number three, it launched and cemented careers. It helped put Keanu Reeves on the mainstream map, and it locked in an on-screen duo, Reeves and Alex Winter, with "We've Been Friends Forever" chemistry. And that bond has kept echoing in public moments, like their much-talked-about reunion on Broadway in Waiting for Godot. And finally, the franchise proved the vibe could survive time. The long-belated third film, Bill and Ted Face the Music, arrived in 2020 and was widely described as a surprisingly warm, largely uncynical legacy sequel, basically the series staying true to its original moral DNA, 30 years later. So the legacy isn't just nostalgia. It's that Bill and Ted offered a simple thesis: friendship, curiosity, kindness, and wrapped it in a package so goofy you don't notice you're being handed a worldview until you're already quoting it. By any normal Hollywood math, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure shouldn't have endured the way it has. It's a high-concept comedy built on silly voices, a phone booth, and the radical proposition that being nice might actually matter, and yet, here we are. The movie did real business in its day, released February 17, 1989, and ultimately earning over $40 million domestic. But the bigger story is what happened afterward. It settled into the rare status of a quote-friendly, endlessly rewatchable cult classic, the kind that gets passed down like a mixtape. There's a few reasons why it stuck. Number one, it made wholesome feel rebellious. In an era where a lot of comedies leaned on cruelty, Bill and Ted built its whole identity around earnestness and friendship. Be excellent to each other became less of a punchline and more of a slogan people actually tried to live by. Number two, it treated history like people, not wallpaper. Even scholars and cultural critics have noted the odd little spark here. The film is dumb in the most strategic way, using pop comedy to sneak in curiosity and empathy about the past. Number three, it launched and cemented careers. It helped put Keanu Reeves on the mainstream map, and it locked in an on-screen duo, Reeves and Alex Winter, with "We've Been Friends Forever" chemistry. And that bond has kept echoing in public moments, like their much-talked-about reunion on Broadway in Waiting for Godot. And finally, the franchise proved the vibe could survive time. The long-belated third film, Bill and Ted Face the Music, arrived in 2020 and was widely described as a surprisingly warm, largely uncynical legacy sequel, basically the series staying true to its original moral DNA, 30 years later. So the legacy isn't just nostalgia. It's that Bill and Ted offered a simple thesis: friendship, curiosity, kindness, and wrapped it in a package so goofy you don't notice you're being handed a worldview until you're already quoting it. Be excellent to each other survives because it's doing two jobs at once. It's a dumb little catchphrase in the mouths of two lovable knuckleheads, and it's also the movie's entire moral engine. The future utopia in Bill and Ted isn't built on conquest or genius, it's built on a vibe, curiosity, generosity, and the radical act of not being a jerk. What's sneaky about the word excellent is that it's not just be nice, it's aspirational. Nice is passive. Excellent implies effort, like kindness is something you practice, not something you are. That framing is a big reason the quote got adopted outside fandom. It's been repeatedly repurposed as a bite-sized ethical reminder in essays, pop culture write-ups, and even leadership and self-improvement context. It also helps that the line is paired with its perfect pressure release valve. Party on, dudes! Together, they form a tiny life philosophy. Take people seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously. A lot of commentary about the franchise points out that this combination, kindness plus levity, is the core people remember long after the plot details blur. And there's one more reason it endures. It's non-sectarian and portable. You don't have to buy into any worldview to use it, and it doesn't demand moral perfection, just a direction. Though I will point out that some critics have also argued that the movies don't always live up to their own ideal, pointing at jokes and attitudes typical of the era that clash with the excellent message. That tension is part of the honest legacy conversation too. The slogan aged better than some of the material around it. If Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure feels like it popped fully formed out of a neon-lit teen brain in 1989, the reality is messier. More drafts, detours, and wait, are we even making this movie? Energy than you'd expect from something so breezy on screen. Bill and Ted started as a comedy bit. Writers Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson originally played with Bill and Ted as personas, basically goofing around in conversation and improv before they became screenplay characters. And the earliest concept wasn't even a standard movie. It leaned toward an anthology or sketch format, think Kentucky Fried Movie vibes, before shifting into a more traditional story structure, reportedly with a nudge from Richard Matheson, Chris's father, and the legendary sci-fi and horror author. The Time Machine used to be a van, and Back to the Future forced to pivot. Early drafts had the time travel coming from a time van. Even the working title floated as Bill and Ted's Time Van. Then Back to the Future, with the time travel DeLorean, came along, and Bill and Ted had to swerve hard into a different idea. That swerve gave them the phone booth, arguably the most perfect, cheap, iconic, instantly readable time machine ever. One account credits director Stephen Herrick with the phone booth concept, inspired by the old college gag of cramming as many people as possible into one. And they almost made one of the darkest casting choices imaginable, and then backed away. In draft form, the Napoleon in the Mall role reportedly flirted with being Hitler instead. And then the filmmakers had the extremely correct realization that you cannot have Bill and Ted palling around with a lovable Hitler. Napoleon stays. History and the tone survives. Casting was so weird, even the leads got confused about who they were playing. Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter reportedly went through a rigorous audition process and were chosen for their chemistry, and then in a wonderfully on-brand moment, they each thought that they had been cast as the other guy, until costume fittings cleared it up. Even better, old audition material has surfaced over the years showing how early the Wild Stallions energy was already there. Rufus wasn't locked in when filming began, which is terrifying. Rufus is the spine of the movie, the calm hand that makes the chaos feel purposeful. Yet the production reportedly started without the role fully cast, creating on-set anxiety and even a running joke where people pitched increasingly ridiculous candidates. When George Carlin did land the role, he didn't just play Rufus, he apparently helped clarify the movie. After test screenings showed confusion about the bigger context, Carlin reportedly wrote the film's introduction himself. San Dimas, California was shot mostly in Arizona, plus a quick Rome flex. The movie is set in Southern California's suburbia, but to save money, it was filmed largely around the Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale area in Arizona. And then, because filmmaking is chaos, there's also reporting that the production did a short stretch in Rome for some of the period European scenes, squeezing big, we're a real movie visuals out of an indie-ish budget reality. The ending got rebuilt because the first version wasn't excellent. One of the most Bill and Ted things behind the scenes is the finale we remember, the auditorium spectacle. But that wasn't the original plan. There are accounts that an earlier climax version fell flat in execution, and they pivoted toward the punchier, bigger show ending that we got. And it nearly didn't release when they expected it. The film's budget is commonly listed around $10 million, and it was completed earlier than its 1989 release date, yet there's reporting that it's sat in limbo due to distributor company financial turmoil. When people call Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure just a silly time travel comedy, they're not wrong. There are mall chases, historical VIPs getting gloriously lost, and a phone booth doing more heavy lifting than most spaceships can. But just silly doesn't explain why it's stuck. Because the film's real trick is that it sneaks a remarkably sturdy idea into a movie that looks like it was assembled out of guitar picks and good intentions. The future isn't built by being the loudest, the toughest, or the most brilliant. It's built by being open, being curious, being decent. The past becomes less like a trophy case and more like a family reunion, awkward, chaotic, occasionally misunderstood, and still worth showing up for. And maybe that's the reason the story keeps time traveling right alongside its characters. In a genre that often obsesses over catastrophic timelines, Bill and Ted offers an alternate theory of history, that small goodness scales. That friendliness has consequences, that empathy is quietly world-changing. Which is a pretty wild message to smuggle inside a movie where the fate of civilization depends on two teenagers passing a history report. So wherever you are in the timeline, whether you're cramming for your own impossible deadline, trying to make sense of the past, or just looking for a reason to be hopeful, remember the philosophy that launched 1,000 air guitars. Be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes!